Welcome to The Right Focus, a podcast for writers, newbies, and veterans, and everyone in between. We're hosted by Emma Lee with the assistance of Remy Black and Edie Rooms, all from Writers Inc. Books. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Each episode lasts as long as it takes to fix a quick dinner, drive a short commute, or take a brisk walk. Resources and links are in the show notes. Visit us at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Now, on to this week's episode. So let's get straight into the interview. Introduce yourself, Pam, and tell us what you write, and then talk to us about technology that you use.
All right. Well, my full proper name, as far as both myself and my writing, is Pamela Ebel, and I am a native of California, but I have lived in Louisiana since 1968 when I came for graduate school. And I lived in New Orleans for almost 50 years and moved out to what we call Old Metairie in 2019, which is just a suburb of New Orleans. It's like Leave It to Beaverland, if you get my gist, which is a stark difference from all of the places that I lived in New Orleans proper. But at any rate, as far as my writing career goes, such as it is at the moment, I started writing years ago. And at the point in time in 2020, we had only moved to this new home, maybe I think Thanksgiving of 2019. So of course, in 2020, after Carnival, Mardi Gras here, which occurred at the end of January, COVID hit. Yes. And it hit hard here in our area because all of these people that were roaming around by the thousands on the streets for carnival parades, and everything closed down. The city, the state closed down for us. And I was trying to decide what to do and thought, well, I have all of these short stories. I had taken a creative writing course starting in 2017. And I had at the end, 2017, 18, and 19, they ran it like semesters, like a regular college. It's a private organization for people 50 and over. But at any rate, I had close to 300 short stories that I had written by the time we had to close down for COVID. So I just simply started looking around and looking online, listening to various podcasts, and found articles on what to do and how to submit short stories, and just started submitting. And lo and behold, about midway in that process, I began to get acceptances, which just the luck of the draw as best I can figure, considering I knew nothing about the process of submission. And I continued on in that path. So to this day, I have numerous short stories that are published in a variety of online magazines and e-zines and in anthologies, a variety of anthologies. And I publish my own short story series, of which I've put 2 up so far on my website. And I launched my novella, 4 Pieces of Evidence, back in February. I simply put it up as a Google Doc and announced it on my Facebook page and to my many loyal friends over the years so that you could simply go and open up and download the Google Doc. It's free to read. And I want to make one quick comment about this process as far as my career. This, Emily, is career number 5 for me.
That's a wow.
Yeah. And I taught for 48 years, full-time for 10, and then the rest of it part-time at Tulane University. I got a law degree. I practiced law had my own law practice for 7 years and then was asked by Loyola Law School in New Orleans, where I got my degree, if I would come back and take over and create several different programs for them. So I spent 15 years there as an associate dean for special programs.
Right.
And when they made me an offer, I decided I could refuse. I left them and opened my own continuing legal seminar business, which I ran for 10 years. So the two-lane teaching, and then I taught at a few others in universities as well in that time period. But the two-lane was one constant through all of those various positions. And I finally retired from the two-lane position in 2019.
Right, so, right before COVID.
Right before COVID, right. So consequently, the writing and the publishing and the organizational skills that one needs if you're going to do it on your own. I was very lucky to have had all of these multi-year careers, all of which I was the person doing whatever I was supposed to be doing. And I had to learn how to handle all of that. And if I had staff, which I did at a couple of those positions, how to work with my staff. So I was very lucky. I am also at the point at this time in my life where I don't need money. In fact, my husband says, don't get into this selling those books. You'll screw up the taxes and so on and so forth. I'm not bragging. I'm just making a statement because I want people to understand that some of the decisions that I make and have made about it's now 5 years, I can't quite believe it, that I have been turning to writing full time. Those decisions are made based on my personal status. But I will also be truthful, and I am certain that your listeners will know this if they are trying or have published or multi-published or just getting started. You are not going to become wealthy in this business.
That's true. That is very true. It takes luck. We have no control over luck.
That's right.
It takes hitting the market at just the right time with enough of a splash, which is also luck, because the big splash comes from word of mouth. And so that's what it takes in order for people to jump into bestseller status.
And if everyone would look, if you pay attention to your, let's say your New York Times bestsellers lists, the majority of the people, if you take a look at who's on your bestseller list right now for hardback or the paperback versions, and just go back 5 years, you will see that half of those people that were on that list 5 years ago are no longer on that list.
Right.
There are new people, except for the Stephen Kings of the world and the Grishams. Other than that, it's a cyclical thing that also goes where your readership perhaps just reaches a point where they're tired of the same story being told with a different title.
Right.
And so that's something.
Go ahead. People like Stephen King and John Grisham and J.K. Rowling, let's use her also for an example. They didn't make the majority of their money from the writing until they made money in films first.
Exactly.
And J.K. Rowling, I mean, she has all of this wealth, but that's primarily from licensing elements of her story to games, to figurines, to the gaming industry, and things of that sort. That's where George Lucas made the majority of his money, was licensing. And people don't realize it. They look at a writer's success and they go like, oh, I can make that kind of money writing. No, that's not where their money came from.
Right. And it takes time. And the other thing that I would like to stress, particularly for those who this is either now becoming a second career or like myself, a fifth career, and particularly older women, there is something that it applies to all writers, but for women in particular and older women, and I'm talking 50 and above, where you're trying to decide, I'm going to break in or whatever. Many times, and I remember at the Killer Nashville conference, not this year, but the year before, that was my first time going, and I was on a panel that was directed specifically for people who were using this as a second or new career, and what should they be considering. And I recall I was the last of the panelists, and I listened to all of the various individuals, and nobody asked these people what I considered the most crucial question. And for me, it was, what is your business plan? So when it got to me, I said, how many of you are members of a writing group? Practically no one. Maybe a couple of sisters in crime, but that was it. How many of you regularly attend conferences or any opportunities where you live, where writers convene? To practically no one. And it hit me. They wanted to know, well, how do I go about submitting and how much money can I expect? And that was when I realized we needed a serious wake-up call. So my one observation is to pay attention to what it takes to run a business. And writing is just like any other business, particularly if you are self-employed. That's something that people don't think about. I'm going to write and I'm going to submit, or I'm going to pay someone to edit. And then all of those decisions cost you money. And if you are on a tight budget, you really need to start thinking about running this process you are engaged in as a business. They just
and you'll say, like, I know I bought into that Canva, and it's only about $100, and for my podcast I have to pay another $100, and then the website's another $100 or more than that. And it's these little dribs and drabs of cash that when you encounter them, you think, oh, that's not so much. But when you start adding them up at the end of the year, then it becomes a substantial amount of money. You're going like, oh, wait. And that doesn't even count paying for a cover or something of that nature, because the cover is the first thing that people see. And if they don't have a good cover, they're going to turn away. And I don't think new writers realize that particular thing. I don't even think some of these writers who've been doing it independently for several years, they think, oh, I need an agent. Oh, I need an editor. That's not where their money should go immediately.
And that's one of the things that I really was pleased that I had this opportunity to share with you. I'm going for the Killer Nashville conference for next year. I have proposed to the people putting the program together if they would let me give a 50-minute or an hour-long presentation just on this issue of what it is you need to know, decisions you need to make realistically about where you want to go with this. And because it's going to impact your family. If you are still working, either full or part-time, and this you're trying to put it in the midst of all of that, it impacts everything that you do. So consequently, looking out at that group of mostly women at that first Killer Nashville panel that I participated in, I just thought, we really need a sit down, a serious sit down on this. And so that's something that I want to suggest to everybody. And the other thing I would suggest is, if in your area you have groups of writers that gather, I'm going to say two things here. I know this will rile some. Be wary of writers groups that you have to pay an arm and a leg to for them
Yes.
to tell you how to write, when to write, what to do with it. Those people, yes, they will have to have been published somewhere or even self-published in order for you to think, oh, well, that makes sense. They make their money off of you.
Yes, exactly.
Not off of their writing. So you need to be very wary. But there
Yes.
are numerous groups of writers in your local areas, and online you can join for free, several groups that I can think of, where they share their experiences. And if you email into the group and say, I don't understand thus and such, sooner or later you might have 10 to 15 people telling you what they've learned, and it's free. So
Yes.
just be wary of getting involved when they say, you know, give me some cash and I'll make you a superstar. That's not how it works.
That's very, very true. Very, very true. I know the first thing, well, back in 2013, when I started trying to convert to writing, because I saw my retirement from my main job was coming up in like 4 or 5 years. And I thought, okay, if I want to do this, what changes do I need to make in my life? It took me 2 solid years to teach myself to write constantly and consistently throughout the year instead of just dibbling and dabbling and working on a single project instead of going into this one for a little bit and going into that one for a little bit and finishing what I started instead of having all these manuscripts out. But the big business thing that I was very helpful to me was something called the SMART plan, where you have a specific goal, you measure exactly what's going to be required, how are you going to achieve that goal, how are you going to relate that to your business goals, and then how much time will it take you? And that was very, very essential to me. And when people ask me, you know, how do you work at your writing? I go like SMART. And that's what I tell them immediately.
And that's very crucial. If you don't have, you can be a wonderful creative writer, yet you've got to understand that whether you are self-publishing or you submit, let's say, to online e-zines, you do short stories, or I know a number of them that they'll take novella length works, novelettes. And some of these online publishers also do hardcover. They'll do anthologies. And sometimes if they like a person, they'll take it, work without agent. You don't need an agent. You're working directly with this publisher, and they will do like a collection for you of stories. But all that said, you have to learn, you have to understand to read submission guidelines and follow them. And if you don't know what the Shunn format is for submitting any story or novel that you're not doing yourself, well, even if you are doing yourself, if you don't know what that is, you have got to learn it. And so it's things like that I had no clue when I started, but I knew enough to know I didn't know. That's what you have to start doing, and you have to take it seriously. And then the other piece of advice is when it comes to your family and your friends, you need to also be able to tell them. I just wrote a nice lengthy article for Writers and Publishers magazine, and I entitled it Writers Who Lunch Not. And the whole idea is to make people understand. I work from home. I do have an office where all of my old law furniture is there, and that was where I ran a couple of my businesses, but there are other people doing all sorts of other things in that space, including my husband, and I can't think with all that racket. So I work right here from my home. I have a dedicated office, but I have to make people understand that I am not sitting here each day eating bonbons and reading sex magazines. You know, I am working.
Yes.
And that requires of the writer a compact explanation of what I do, what I am up to as a writer. Because when someone says, well, are you retired? They just assume at my age I am. I say, no, I'm a writer of short fiction, which means nothing to most of them. And then they say, and where do you publish it or whatnot? You have make sure you state clearly what you are in your mind and that you are professional. And sooner or later, it begins to track with people that you are working. Just because you are working from home, or many people work from like a coffee shop. I can't do that either. But if that works for you, that's fine. People have to understand that that's how you work, not why you work.
Yes, exactly. I need to be away from people in order to think. I can proof while people are around. I can do revision while people are around. But if I'm in the creative aspect, I don't need any distractions. Birdsong can even distract me. A big truck driving past the window will distract me. And so I definitely need some time alone away, or in a place where the sounds that are around me are not going to affect my writing, the creative aspect.
And there again, it's just that is part of our responsibility to ourselves. If you want to make the commitment. Now, I have friends and they took like that creative writing class with me. I have 3 good friends, and 2 of them, they just write, they share it, they read it. I started a writing group here in town, and they'll come, but they have no desire. They don't want anyone to edit. If we say blah, blah, they say, well, this is fiction, it's my story, and that's the way it's going to be, to which you say, fine. But so there are 2 different tracks there when it comes to writing. And you have to know if you were attempting to do professional work as a writer, with friends like that, that's great, that's wonderful, and we all share. But in your own mind, you have to be a professional, so that you say that to people, that I'm a writer, they understand that you have goals, and they're not what you see in the movies about people who are writers.
Yeah, very rarely do they show real writers at work. That's all. That always is very humorous to me, how they show them. We are starting to wind down on our time. If I can get my phone to come up. It says 5 minutes before my timer goes off, which means we have 15 minutes before the end. What else would you like to talk about?
Well, I know that you had asked in your email to me, and you mentioned it as we opened this morning, about the kinds of, for a better word, writing tools, things that I use. And I will say, I don't use anything but Word. I don't have I don't Grammarly, or I have nothing against those, but I don't need them. It's just, I've got my degrees in a bachelor's and a master's in rhetoric and public address, and my law degree. All of those were writing oriented studies.
Yes.
And then all of my careers before this one, I had to produce writings of varying types and lengths. So I don't use all of those tools. I know that they are varied and many, but I would simply return to what you made the observation for just a while ago, that, well, I'll get Grammarly to do this, and then I'm going to get that over there, and I'll do. It all begins to add up.
Yes.
And if in the end you still don't have a finished product, you are wasting your time.
Yes, that's very, very true. Very,
And I
very
do
true.
have two good friends, both of whom have their backgrounds, multi-backgrounds in English. So
Hmm.
one of them I call the comma queen. And I ship it off to her, and she says, comma, or no comma. Yeah. The other one is a great structural editor.
Hmm.
So and they're friends, so I don't
Hmm.
have to pay them. And they also will talk to me about the development of the story. If
Right.
something is missing, and you know that yourself, you work on something so long, I don't care how many times I edit it. If I'm ready or I've already sent it off, they've accepted it, and the editors don't even catch it. And I think, that's a damn comma. I shouldn't have a comma there. Why didn't you guys take that comma out? So
Why do I have
sometimes,
two D's?
yeah, yes, sometimes no matter how many eyes look at it, you don't catch everything. And how
Yes.
many novels have we read? Uh,
Yes. Yes.
glaring
Traditionally
mistake.
published.
Yeah. And by the way, that is one other thing I would observe when you are pondering right now the lay of the land when it comes to writing.
Hmm.
In 2023, the 5 brick and mortar publishing houses, the traditional houses, the
Hmm.
Penguins, etc., who of course are gobbling each other up as quickly as they
Yes.
can, but they produced, now these are books, 10,000 books, you
Hmm.
know. At that same time last year, self-publishing produced 500,000
Yes. Hmm.
books. Now
Yeah.
think about that. The flooding of the possible readership out there with all of these options,
Hmm.
self-published and online and
Hmm.
hardline. And we need to realize that this is an extremely competitive
Yes.
field. It's not easy. And so the first thing everybody says, that's one question I always ask, like that group 2 years ago. And I said, well, how many of you are going or have written a novel? Every hand goes up. I said, yes, the great American novel. We're all going to write the great, I have the great American novels. One thing I worked on for years before I actually started taking that short story course that I was in. And I pitched it, and I actually have, bless his heart, the senior editor at Penguin. We'll probably both be dead before I ever get it into, because every year at a conference, I see him and he says, where is my car book? And I say, well, it's run out of gas temporarily, and that's been years. But what I finally decided to do with that particular book, I've really gotten into writing series, short story series, and putting them up. And I went back the other day, I just stumbled across Twice Drowned, which is the name of that novel. And I began looking at it and I thought, well, the best thing I should do with it is pull it out and work it into a series of short stories.
Hmm.
Just one chapter or a couple of chapters together and put it up that way. That way people get to read it. The 3 ghosts that live in the 1934 Packard that the car's about that are in my garage will be happy that they finally get their just desserts. So, but that's something that everyone should consider too, is you have a longer piece that just didn't seem to get anywhere for you. Take another look at it and consider reorganizing it
Right.
into a series of stories.
Hmm. Right. I have turned into a lover of short fiction. I wasn't. When we spoke, had an interview much earlier, I was not a lover of short fiction at that time. And then I started I had to teach myself how to write a short story. I taught
Yes.
short stories for 30 years. I should have known, but I didn't know. And you encouraged me to get involved into the idea of short stories. And I have written like 30 of them since then. I've written
Wonderful.
novellas. I'm currently writing a novelette, and I have fallen in love with the short story aspect, or the shorter aspect rather than the long, involved novel.
Right.
I can make it punchier and get where I need to be more quickly without having to work all these extraneous plots in as well, subplots to the main plot.
And if I can take a couple of minutes on that very subject, because you and I have talked about that, I would like to encourage everyone else who's not engaged in short story fiction or has never even thought about it. I want to give you 6 reasons why you should really consider it. It's to encourage people at least to take a look at it. First, they take less time to complete than a novel, as you and I just said. And particularly if either at a certain age, we're not going to live forever, as you know, I've discovered. And so that's one thing. Secondly, you don't need an agent to submit your short stories. And that in itself is very, very exciting, and it empowers the writer that you don't need an agent. Third, it gives you an opportunity to submit, and it increases the publication opportunities without a middle person, which includes, like you mentioned, not only the agent, but maybe there's got to be an editor. You got to pay someone to do this and that. You don't have to do that with short stories. Most of the ones that I submit to, they do their own covers for my stories, and they're always right on spot with whatever I've written. So we're getting rid of the middle person twice and not just once. Fourth, it increases the submission opportunities, and that increases the publication opportunities that you have. And when you enter the paying markets, of which there are many, well, then that's going to increase some revenue for you because it comes, they're short stories. They'll have windows that are maybe a few weeks or a couple of months long. You either got accepted or not. And if you get accepted, they pay you right there. It's that kind of thing. You have more freedom. This is the one I like, to change genres.
Yes.
I get bored if I had to write only one type of story. So I'm all over the board with my stories in genre-wise, and I have a variety of different online publishers. Some I do revenge stories. I've killed my ex-husband at least 7 different times in my flash fiction. I have another group with Elvira the elephant and Poodles the pig, the retired circus performers union. That
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, to help the Shriners with their circus to raise money. So I'm all over the board, and I love it. I couldn't do the same thing over and over again. I just drive me crazy. And this one I think is really important. With short fiction, when you find niches for it, it's going to allow you to create your resume.
Right.
And not that everybody cares about, 6 million, I was this, that, and they're not going to read it. I'll tell you that right now. But if you can just say, I have been published in this one and that one, and many others, if you want a list, let me know.
Yes.
Those are 6 really good reasons, at least, to take a look at short fiction. And by that, if it's flash fiction, you're looking between 750 and 1,000 words. And you know, and I know how difficult that is. But short fiction, generally, it's going to go 1,000. Some places will take upwards of around 10 to 12,000. But that's unusual. They're going to range from 1,000 to 2,500 to 3,000 words. But it's challenging. It's much harder than a novel. And
yes, it is.
You have to learn to kill your little darlings. And we all know what that is.
You got to cut them out ruthlessly.
Yeah.
According to Zoom, we have less than 3 minutes to go. So I do want to promote the Short Mystery Fiction Society. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
They are a wonderful, wonderful resource They have a
Yes.
list of markets. They have people who provide advice and encouragement. They're just really great. What is the contest that they run? Is it the Derringer Award?
They run the Derringer that will open January 1st of each year. So January 1st, the Derringers for published
Right.
stories of this year.
Mhm.
But yes, they have definitely a wonderful option. And then there is Sisters in Crime. Now, the Short Mystery Fiction Society is free to join. It doesn't cost you anything. You do have to pay for Sisters. But there again, if you are into an area where you have a local chapter and you join the local chapter and the national, those local chapters, we had one in New Orleans that just, we couldn't get anybody to come. And finally in 2019, I got disgusted and said, I'm out of here, which is why I created my own writing group. But look around for those opportunities, and in your own area, look for groups of writers to get involved with and share. So, but yes, Short Mystery Fiction Society. And again, those people, we write in all sorts of genres. You'll see someone who will announce they've got a publication. They'll say, not a mystery, but, and I'm the first to click on that because I want to know where they are and what they're writing that isn't mystery.
Right. Yes. Well, Pamela, thank you so much for talking with me. We have filled up the time, which rarely
I'm glad to hear that.
And are you going to Killer of Nashville this year?
I think I am. I said, I've got this idea that I sent to them, but they won't put it on unless I register to go. And so I'm not really sure for a couple of other reasons. Then I like the conference. It's not bad, but there's some other reasons in my life right now. But I'm thinking about it. If I decide that I really want to put that panel together, I will probably register. Are you going? I assume you are.
Not this coming year, but definitely maybe next year or the next.
Right. And also for everyone, BoucherCon this year is here in 2025 is here in New Orleans in September of next year.
All right. So, thank you so much. We better quit because we've got less than a minute. That was 30 seconds ago.
Thanks for listening to The Rock Focus, a podcast for writers at all levels, hosted by Emma Lee from Writers Inc. Books, assisted by Remy Black and Edie Runes. Our focus is productivity, process, craft, and tools. Music is licensed through Audio Jungle, called Background Music Loop. Its creator is Alexander Polishchuk, known on Audio Jungle as Plastic 3. The music comes in different iterations. Show notes and resource links for this and other episodes can be found at therightfocus.blogspot.com. Write to us at winkbooks@aol.com when you have questions, comments, and speculations. We will try to answer you as quickly as possible. By the way, we will not mind your email address. That's rude. If you find value in our content, share with your writing friends or write a review. We're small beans here without the advertising budget of the big peeps, and you can make a difference. And whatever occurs, write on.